help me reach 1,000 subscribers. Please like the video and share your thoughts on the video. Your feedback helps make the contents better. Now let's get to the story.
My hands were shaking as I unfolded the small piece of paper. The entire church was watching me. The organ music had stopped. My daughter Sarah stood at the altar in her white dress, tears streaming down her face, and her fiancé Marcus looked confused and angry. The note had just 3 words written in her handwriting. "Dad, help me." I looked up at her, and in that moment I saw the same little girl who used to run to me when she had nightmares. Without thinking twice, I stood up from my seat in the front pew. "This wedding is not happening," I said, my voice echoing through the church. My name is Robert Mitchell. I'm 52 years old, and I've spent the last 30 years building my life from nothing into something I'm proud of. I grew up poor in a small town in Montana, watching my father work himself to death in the mines. I promised myself I'd do better for my own family. I started with a small piece of land, worked 3 jobs, and slowly built Mitchell Ranch into one of the most successful cattle operations in the state. It's 3,000 acres of rolling hills, prime grazing land, and the home where I raised my daughter after my wife died when Sarah was just 8 years old. Being a single father wasn't easy. There were school plays where I was the only dad in a sea of mothers. There were tears over boys, fights about curfews, and countless nights where I questioned every decision I made. But Sarah and I, we were a team. We had each other's backs. Or at least, I thought we did. Sarah grew up to be beautiful, smart, and kind. She went to college and studied business management. She'd always talked about coming back to help me run the ranch, maybe expanding it, turning it into something even bigger. That was our dream, our future. Then she met Marcus Devane at a business conference in Denver about 1.5 years ago. I should have known something was wrong from the start. Marcus was one of those guys who smiled too much, talked too smooth, and always seemed to be calculating something behind his eyes. He was 35, worked in real estate development, and drove a car that cost more than most people make in 2 years. He wore expensive suits and had perfectly styled hair that probably required more products than Sarah's entire makeup collection. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these stories matter. When Sarah first brought him home to the ranch, Marcus looked around like he was surveying a property for sale rather than visiting his childhood home. He asked questions about the land, about property values in the area, about my future plans. I thought he was just trying to understand Sarah's background, trying to connect with me. I was wrong. Over the next few months, Marcus became a regular visitor. He was always polite, always bringing gifts, always saying the right things. Sarah seemed happy, and that's all I cared about. She'd light up when he walked into a room. She laughed more. She seemed to be in love. But there were small things that bothered me. The way Marcus would steer conversations toward the ranch's finances, how he'd casually ask about my retirement plans, the way he'd look at Sarah when she talked about her dreams of running the ranch someday, like he was waiting for her to finish so he could correct her. My foreman, Jim, who'd worked with me for 20 years, didn't trust Marcus either. "That boy's got dollar signs in his eyes, Rob," Jim told me one evening as we fixed a fence line. "He doesn't look at Sarah the way a man in love should. He looks at her like she's a means to an end." "You're being paranoid," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure I believed them. 6 months ago, Marcus proposed. Sarah called me crying, so happy she could barely speak. She showed me the ring over video call, a massive diamond that probably cost more than my truck. We celebrated, and I pushed my concerns aside. My little girl was getting married. I needed to be happy for her. The wedding planning started immediately. Marcus insisted on handling most of it. He said he wanted to give Sarah her dream wedding, that money was no object. The venue he chose was a historic church in Billings, expensive and impressive. The reception was booked at a luxury hotel. Everything was top tier. Everything was perfect. But Sarah seemed stressed. Every time I talked to her, she seemed tired, worn down. She said wedding planning was just overwhelming, that there were so many decisions to make. I offered to help, but Marcus always seemed to have everything under control. Then, about 2 months before the wedding, Marcus started visiting the ranch more often, always without Sarah. He said he wanted to bond with me, to understand the business that was so important to my daughter. We'd ride out to check on the cattle, and he'd ask more questions. How much was the land worth? Did I have a will? What were my plans for succession? I should have seen it then. I should have understood what he was doing. "You know, Robert," Marcus said one afternoon as we sat on the porch, "you've built something really impressive here, but have you thought about what happens when you can't run it anymore? This kind of operation needs younger blood, fresh ideas." "Sarah will run it," I said firmly. "That's always been the plan." Of course," Marcus said, smiling that smooth smile. "But Sarah and I have been talking. What if there was a way to maximize the value of this property? Development is booming in Montana. This land, in the right hands, could be worth 10 times what it's worth as a ranch." My blood ran cold. "This ranch isn't for sale." "I'm not suggesting selling," Marcus said quickly. "Just exploring options for Sarah's future, for your future. You've worked hard all your life, Robert. Don't you want to retire? Enjoy your golden years?" I ended that conversation quickly, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I called Sarah that night. "Honey, has Marcus been talking to you about selling the ranch?" There was a long pause. "Dad, we've just been discussing options, nothing concrete. Marcus thinks there might be opportunities to—" "Sarah, this ranch is your inheritance. It's your legacy. We've always planned for you to run it." "I know, Dad, and I will. We're just talking. Don't worry about it." But I did worry. I worried a lot. If you're watching this and you've ever had that gut feeling that something isn't right, don't ignore it. I ignored mine, and I almost lost everything because of it. Hit that subscribe button and stick around, because this story gets a whole lot worse before it gets better. The weeks leading up to the wedding were strange. Sarah seemed distant, distracted. When I'd try to talk to her alone, Marcus always seemed to appear, always had somewhere they needed to be. The few times I did get her on the phone by herself, she sounded strained, like she was choosing her words carefully. 3 weeks before the wedding, my lawyer, Tom Anderson, called me into his office. Tom and I had been friends since high school, and he'd handled all my legal affairs for years. "Rob, I need to talk to you about something," Tom said, looking uncomfortable. "I got a call from a lawyer in Denver. They're representing Marcus Devane." My stomach dropped. What did they want? "They were asking questions about your estate planning, about the ranch's ownership structure. They wanted to know if Sarah had any legal claim to the property currently." What the hell? I stood up, anger flooding through me. Why would Marcus's lawyer be asking about that? "I don't know, but I don't like it. Rob, I think you need to have a serious conversation with Sarah about what she's getting into." I tried. God knows I tried. But every time I brought up Marcus or the ranch or their future plans, Sarah shut down. She'd get defensive, accusing me of not trusting her judgment, of not being happy for her. We had our worst fight ever 2 weeks before the wedding. "Why can't you just be happy for me, Dad?" she screamed, tears running down her face. "I love him. We're getting married. Why can't that be enough for you?" "Because I don't trust him, Sarah. He's more interested in our ranch than he is in you." "That's not true. You don't know him like I do. You're just being controlling, just like Mom always said you were." That hurt. Bringing up her mother, throwing old arguments from a marriage that ended 20 years ago in my face. I backed off. I didn't want to push her away completely. I told myself that maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was being overprotective. Maybe Marcus really did love her, and I was just having trouble letting my little girl go. The night before the wedding, there was a rehearsal dinner at the hotel. It was a lavish affair, over 100 people, an open bar, expensive catering. Marcus's family was there, his parents who barely acknowledged me, his 2 brothers who were carbon copies of him, all smooth talk and expensive watches. I sat at the head table, watching Sarah. She looked beautiful in her rehearsal dress, but she wasn't smiling, not really. Her eyes were empty, going through the motions. Marcus had his arm around her possessively, showing her off to his business associates like a trophy. At one point in the evening, I went outside for some air. I found Sarah there, alone on the balcony, staring out at the city lights. "Hey, sweetheart," I said softly. She jumped, startled. "Dad, hi. You okay? You seem a little overwhelmed in there." "I'm fine. Just needed a minute." But her voice cracked on the last word. I moved closer to her. "Sarah, if you're having second thoughts, if there's anything you need to tell me, you know you can, right? It's not too late. It's never too late." For a moment, I thought she was going to say something. Her mouth opened, her eyes filled with tears, but then the door behind us opened, and Marcus stepped out. "There you two are. Sarah, honey, my parents want to get some photos, and Robert, my father, wants to talk to you about some business opportunity." The moment was gone. Sarah wiped her eyes, put on a fake smile, and followed Marcus inside. I stood there on that balcony, feeling helpless and afraid. Marcus's father cornered me near the bar. Richard Devane was a big man in his 60s, with the kind of confidence that comes from old money and old connections. "Robert, I've heard so much about your ranch. 3,000 acres, prime Montana land. That's quite an asset." "It's home," I said carefully. Of course, but at some point you'll want to slow down. Marcus has some brilliant ideas about what could be done with that property. Mixed-use development, luxury housing, maybe a resort. The area is ripe for it." "The area is ranch land. It's going to stay ranch land." "Now, let's not be hasty. Think about Sarah. Think about the life Marcus can provide for her. They're going to need capital to start their lives together. That land, properly developed, could set them up for life."
I felt sick. This wasn't about love. This wasn't about my daughter's happiness. This was a business deal. Marcus was marrying Sarah to get access to the ranch, and his whole family was in on it. I should have stopped the wedding right then. I should have grabbed Sarah and told her everything. But I didn't have proof, just suspicions and bad feelings, and I was afraid of pushing her away forever. The wedding day arrived. The church was packed with people, most of them Marcus's family and friends. Sarah's side was smaller, people from town, some of her college friends, Jim and the ranch hands who'd watched her grow up. I walked Sarah down the aisle. She was trembling, holding my arm so tight it almost hurt. I thought it was just wedding nerves. When we reached the altar and the minister asked, "Who gives this woman?" I said the words I'd practiced, but my heart wasn't in them. As I turned to take my seat, Sarah grabbed my hand. "Dad," she whispered, so quiet only I could hear. "I'm scared." But before I could respond, Marcus was there, taking her hand from mine, pulling her toward him. I sat down in the front pew, watching as the ceremony began. The minister started talking about love and commitment. Marcus was smiling, confident, already victorious. Sarah stood stiff and pale, her bouquet shaking in her hands. And then she did something that changed everything. She reached into her bouquet and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. She turned to me, her eyes desperate and pleading, and handed it to me. My hands shook as I unfolded it. 3 words in her handwriting. "Dad, help me." Everything else I've already told you. I stood up. I stopped the wedding. The church erupted in chaos. "What the hell are you doing?" Marcus shouted, his perfect composure finally cracking. "Sarah, get your things. We're leaving," I said, holding out my hand to her. "She's not going anywhere." Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm roughly, and that's when I saw it. The fear in her eyes wasn't just about the wedding. It was about him. "Take your hands off my daughter," I said, my voice deadly calm. "This is insane!" Richard Devane stood up. "You can't just stop a wedding." "Watch me." I looked at Sarah. "Do you want to marry this man?" I can't." Sarah was crying now, really crying. "It's a simple question, sweetheart. Yes or no?" Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell because the revenge I serve up is going to be ice cold and absolutely perfect. You won't want to miss what happens next. No, Sarah finally said, her voice small but clear. No, I don't want to marry him. All hell broke loose. Marcus started yelling, his family started yelling, some guests were shocked, others were filming on their phones. I didn't care about any of it. I took off my jacket and wrapped it around Sarah's shoulders, and we walked down that aisle together, leaving Marcus at the altar. Jim was waiting outside with my truck. Bless that man. He'd suspected something might go wrong. We got Sarah in the truck and drove straight back to the ranch. She cried the whole way, and I held her hand while Jim drove. Back at the ranch house, Sarah finally told me everything. Marcus had been controlling from the start, isolating her from her friends, monitoring her phone, telling her what to wear and who to see. He'd convinced her that I was trying to control her life, that the only way to be free was to marry him. He'd promised her the world, but slowly he'd trapped her. He told me that after we got married, we'd sell the ranch, she sobbed. He said you were too old to run it anyway, that it was wasted on cattle when it could be developed. He had it all planned out. He'd already talked to developers, Dad. He had contracts ready to go. Why didn't you tell me? I was ashamed. I felt so stupid for falling for it. And I was scared. He said if I tried to leave him, he'd ruin you. He said his family had connections, that they could make problems for the ranch, get you shut down on violations, make your life hell. I thought if I just went through with it, I could protect you. My daughter had been trying to protect me, and I'd almost let her sacrifice herself to do it. Nobody threatens my family, I said quietly. Nobody. The next morning, I called Tom Anderson. We had work to do. It turned out Marcus had made several mistakes in his arrogance. First, he was so confident the wedding would happen that he'd already started paperwork to transfer portions of the ranch into an LLC he'd set up, listing Sarah as a partner. The problem was, Sarah didn't have any legal ownership of the ranch yet, so the documents were fraudulent. Second, Tom did some digging and found out Marcus had pulled this scam before. 3 years ago, he was engaged to a woman in Colorado who owned a successful ski resort. That engagement ended abruptly, and mysteriously the woman sold her resort shortly after at below market value to a company owned by Marcus's family. Third, and this was the beautiful part, Marcus had been so busy asking questions about my estate and finances that he left a paper trail of his intentions. Tom's contacts in Denver got us copies of emails between Marcus and his lawyer discussing the acquisition strategy for the Mitchell Ranch. We built a case, attempted fraud, coercion, and, thanks to some testimony Sarah was brave enough to give, we had evidence of emotional abuse and manipulation. But I didn't just want legal revenge. I wanted Marcus to feel what Sarah felt, trapped, scared, helpless.
I made some calls to people I knew in the ranching community. Word spreads fast in our world. Within a week, everyone in Montana knew what Marcus had tried to do. His reputation was destroyed. But I wasn't done. Marcus's real estate development company depended on investors and bank financing. I happened to know several of those investors and had relationships with 3 of the banks he worked with. I shared the information Tom had gathered about Marcus's previous scam in Colorado. I shared the emails about his plans for my ranch. Investment money dried up overnight. Banks called in loans. Projects Marcus had in development fell apart. Richard Devane called me, threatening legal action. I told him to go ahead, that I'd love to see how his family's involvement in Marcus's schemes looked in court. He hung up, and I never heard from him again. But the piece de resistance came from an unexpected source. Marcus's ex-fiancé from Colorado, the one with the ski resort, reached out to Sarah. Her name was Jennifer, and she'd seen the news about the canceled wedding online. Jennifer told us she'd been pressured into selling her resort after Marcus had convinced her it was failing, that she'd lose everything if she didn't sell to his family's company. She'd been so worn down, so convinced she was incompetent that she'd agreed. After the sale, Marcus had dumped her, and the resort had been flipped for 3 times what they'd paid her. She'd been trying to build a case against him for years, but didn't have enough evidence. Until now. Together, Sarah, Jennifer, and 2 other women Marcus had scammed came forward. The legal case turned criminal. Marcus was arrested for fraud and extortion. His lawyer tried to make a deal, but Tom was relentless. The trial was 8 months ago. Marcus got 5 years in prison and was ordered to pay restitution to all his victims. His family's real estate empire took such a hit from the scandal that they had to sell off most of their holdings. Jennifer got enough money to buy back her ski resort. The other women got settlements that made them whole. Sarah got her freedom and her confidence back. As for the ranch, Sarah runs it now. I'm still around, still helping out, but she's the boss. She's taken everything I taught her and made it better. We've expanded, bought the neighboring property, and started a program teaching young people about sustainable ranching. Last month, we had a big celebration at the ranch. All our friends and family. Jennifer came with her new husband, a genuinely nice guy who's a ski instructor. Even some of the guests from the canceled wedding showed up, apologizing for not seeing what was happening. Sarah stood up to make a toast. She looked happy, healthy, strong. Nothing like the terrified woman at that altar. "A year and a half ago, I almost made the biggest mistake of my life," she said, looking at me. "I almost let someone convince me that love meant giving up everything I was, everything I wanted, everything I'd worked for. But my dad taught me something that day in the church. He taught me that real love means having someone fight for you, stand up for you, and never let you settle for less than you deserve." She raised her glass. "To my dad, who saved me from myself. And to anyone out there who's ever felt trapped, remember, it's never too late to ask for help. It's never too late to say no. It's never too late to save yourself." Everyone drank to that, and I felt my eyes get misty. My little girl had become an incredible woman. Later that night, as the party wound down, Sarah and I sat on the porch, the same porch where Marcus had tried to convince me to sell our legacy. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd gone through with it?" Sarah asked. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But then I remember you handed me that note. You saved yourself, sweetheart. I just helped you finish the job." "We make a good team," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "Always have, always will." The ranch stretched out before us, 3,000 acres of home and history and future. Marcus had wanted to turn it into luxury condos and resorts. Instead, it remained what it was always meant to be, a place where hard work matters, where family comes first, and where my daughter could build whatever future she wanted. As for Marcus, I heard he got out on parole a few months ago. Last I checked, he was working as a car salesman in Nevada, living in a studio apartment, and his fancy suits and expensive watches were long gone. His father's company went bankrupt. The whole family scattered. Some people might say I went too far, that destroying his entire life was excessive, but I remember my daughter's face when she handed me that note. I remember how she trembled when she said she was scared. I remember that she was willing to sacrifice her entire future to protect me from his threats. He didn't just try to steal my land. He tried to steal my daughter's spirit, her autonomy, her dreams. He tried to make her small and afraid and dependent, and he almost succeeded. So no, I don't think I went too far. I think I went exactly far enough. Justice isn't always about courts and jail time. Sometimes it's about making sure a predator can never hunt again. Sometimes it's about protecting the next potential victim. And sometimes it's about showing your daughter that she's worth fighting for, that her dreams matter, that her voice deserves to be heard. Sarah's planning to run for the State Ranching Association board next year. She's got ideas about sustainable practices and protecting family ranches from corporate development. She's gonna be amazing at it. And me? I'm exactly where I want to be, working alongside my daughter, building something that matters, and knowing that when the moment came, when she needed me most, I didn't hesitate. That note from her bouquet is framed in my office now. 3 words, "Dad, help me." And underneath it, I put my own note, 3 words back, "Always and forever." If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Are you in the US, where family ranches like ours are fighting to survive? Maybe you're watching from the Philippines, where family and protecting loved ones means everything. Or are you up in Canada, where the values of hard work and loyalty still matter? Wherever you are in the world, I want to hear from you. Your story matters, your voice matters, and you never know who might need to hear that it's okay to ask for help. Share where you're from in the comments, and let's build a community of people who stand up for what's right. Thanks for watching, and remember, it's never too late to save yourself or someone you love.